All right. Bree, you usually do this and now I'm lost. What is going on? Okay. All right. All right, well, it's almost 7, so let's go ahead and get started. So today we are having this North Carolina, All Aligned North Carolina rapid response training on redistricting criteria. We are doing this because they are voting on redistricting criteria on Thursday. We've just been to a couple committee meetings last week and today. And so we are trying to take action as quickly as we can to get your input in front of the committee about redistricting criteria. So just a little bit about us, if you've never come to one of our events before, All Aligned is a 501c4 campaign to bring people together across every issue to win on redistricting this year. Our goal is to increase grassroots engagement in the process. And so that's what we're here to do tonight, is to figure out how you all can engage in the process, because it is happening. All right, as far as an agenda, we'll talk a little bit, just give a brief overview of why we're here, what's going on. We'll talk about what redistricting criteria actually are. They're not something that I would expect anyone to know about already. And then we'll talk just briefly about like how to actually make a comment, either in person or online. And then we will go through some sort of best practices for making your comment effective. All right. So why we are here. Last week, there was a meeting of the first meeting of the joint House and Senate Redistricting Committee on redistricting to discuss it. And they said that they would be voting on redistricting criteria this Thursday. Our only in-person opportunity to comment is tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Bree, if you would drop the link to sign up to speak, I would go ahead and sign up to speak. They are really drastically limiting the amount of people who can speak. There is only going to be, the hearing is only going to be 2 hours. And people are only getting 2 minutes apiece, so they're only taking 60 speakers. We've also heard that the list filled up or was already filled up before the link to sign up to speak went public. So if you're here and you're able to come tomorrow, please go ahead and reserve a spot to speak, because we know there aren't going to be all that many opportunities. However, I will say, and we'll talk about this a little more later, if you are able to come, and please come, because even if you cannot speak, we will be actually there to, my colleague Ted is going to come, Ted Corcoran, some of you probably follow him on Twitter. He's going to come up and help take some videos of people. So anyone who wasn't able to give their comment to the committee and speak to the committee, we want to see you. We want to record your comment. We want to take a video of you, and we want to share it, because if that happens, and if people are excluded from the process because there are not enough speaking slots, that's a huge problem, and we want to highlight that. So please, even if you're not sure if you're going to be able to actually officially testify in front of the committee, we still want you there, because we want to hear from you and we want to be able to film you. So that said, we only have until Thursday to influence this process. Thursday is when you're voting the criteria. So we'll talk a little bit about in-person testimony tomorrow morning. However, there is the availability of online testimony as well. All right. What are redistricting criteria? So this is my personal favorite federally convicted criminal, David Lewis. And this is the op-ed that he and Senator Ralph Hise wrote. I think this is back in 2016. We do the congressional maps for partisan advantage. That was the point. That's criteria. They did that because partisan advantage was one of their criteria. It was one of the rules they explicitly put into the process. So just to show you, this is the 2016 criteria, and it says here, partisan advantage is one of their criteria. And they say basically that the current congressional map has 10 Republicans and 3 Democrats, and they're going to do everything they possibly can to preserve that ratio. And so just, you know, I don't think we will see anything as blatant as this time around. However, this is why criteria is important. It is the rules that they set for themselves to draw the maps. And so if, you know, they try very hard not to violate their own rules when they're drawing the maps, because obviously that is a legal issue. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about redistricting criteria. So they're the rules that the state legislators use to draw the maps. Two main criteria that are in our state constitution are equal population. So all of the Senate and House districts have to have equal population to each other, plus or minus 5%, which is actually quite a large variance, but close to equal population. And contiguity, each district has to be contiguous. That means it all has to connect together. You can't have one part of a district over here and the other part over here, and they're separated by another district. They have to connect. Those are the two main criteria that are in our state constitution. That's always going to be there. All the other criteria that are used during the redistricting process are voted on in committee. So that's what's going on Thursday. They propose their own criteria and then they vote on whether or not, you know, what criteria they're going to use. So they get to decide all the other rules. Those two rules are the main rules that they actually have to comply with, but all the other rules they get to write themselves. Great. So we did see some proposed criteria today, and I'm going to go through the list of proposed criteria that we saw here just briefly, and then I'm going to go into a little bit more depth on each item. So these are the proposed criteria that we saw. County groupings, which I'm honestly not going to spend time on this training talking about because it's very complicated, and also it's going to become its own separate issue. County groupings are something that are going to have to be chosen a little bit later in the process when we have census data, and so we will probably be doing another one of these rapid trainings with you then. But that is just to say that is one of the criteria if you see that. No racial data. So they're saying they're not going to use any racial data to draw maps. That's hard. ETDs, which is voter tabulation districts. It's basically the census's version of precincts. They should only be split when necessary. Well, I don't know when necessary is, but compactness is another thing. So how compact the district is. I know a lot of you who are interested in redistricting have seen like those long strung out districts, you know, our old District 12 that went up Highway 85. That's not a compact district, right? It's like long and strung out and you know, so a compact district is something that approaches more like a square or a circle. Like a circle would be a perfectly compact district by some measures. So compactness is one. Municipal boundaries may be considered. So that's basically the limits and boundaries of cities. No election data can be used in drawing the districts, so that's what that says. Member residence. So when they say member residence, what they mean is the places where the incumbents live. So to represent a district, you have to live in that district under North Carolina law for state legislature. And so there is an address, they have your address of where you live in the district. You know, you do that when you file as a candidate so that you know that you're a valid candidate for that area because you live there. And so what they're saying here is that they can use those incumbent addresses, the addresses of the people who are already in the legislature for some purpose. In the past, this has been to protect incumbents. Incumbency protection has been a criteria. This time around, it's kind of weird, and I'll talk about it a little bit more. And then at the end, we have, and these are ordered in order of priority, just to say. These are supposedly in order of priority, I believe. At the end is community consideration. So this is community consideration at the end is where the contributions, hopefully, of you all come in. So this is about local people, local communities, and what they think about how the district should look. Okay, let's go into a little bit more depth on some of these. All right, racial data. So basically data identifying the race of individuals or voters shall not be used in the construction or consideration of districts in the 2021 Congressional House and Senate plans. I think this could be well intended. It's also something that came to be out of the Covington case. I think that was the first time they had no racial data as a criteria when they were redrawing the maps for that racial gerrymander. So that is when that came up. However, there are questions that this raises, right? The Voting Rights Act provides for what, we now call minority opportunity districts, or districts where minorities can elect a candidate of their choosing. There's a lot of analysis that goes into where these minority opportunity districts should or can be. But obviously that analysis involves racial data. So if so I think that this raises a question of, well, what does this mean? If we are being race blind when drawing these maps, how are we going to ensure that people of color get adequate representation in the maps if we're not looking at racial data at all? I think it raises that question. VTDs, so voting districts, like I said, this is sort of the census's version of precincts, should be split only when necessary. That's it. That's all the criteria says. Should be split only when necessary. When is it necessary? When is it not necessary? We get no details on under what circumstances should VTDs be split, under what circumstances should they absolutely not be split. None of that's in this criteria. It's just a blank slate. So I think it leaves a lot of leeway to split or not split VTDs whenever you want, because there's not really anything in here that tells you when it's necessary. All right. Next.
Hey, Leica, can we pause and answer a couple questions that are in the chat?
Oh yeah, sorry. I know I'm not looking at chat, so I'm not seeing all the questions.
No, you want me to read it to you?
Yeah, can you read them to me?
Yeah, so that one question is, what do they mean by no election data? And how does that relate to the map makers picking the precincts that they want in their districts?
So no election data means that they not upload into the program that legislators are supposed to use to draw maps. So basically there's a computer terminal or more than one somewhere in the legislature that has this software on it called Maptitude. And that is the software that's used to draw the maps. And so what they're saying with that is they're saying that they are not going to upload any election data. So basically this means on the election results. So like uploading the results of the presidential election or the governor's election or something like that into the software so that you can see, when you're drawing your map, you can see what the different outcomes are. So that's what they mean, is that software will not be uploaded with that data. You won't be able to do that kind of analysis.
Great. And another question, even if they don't say that racial data and election data are not formal criteria, don't they all know about this data? If so, can't they use them in a sneaky way?
Yeah, that was the point I was just about to make with regard to the election data as well. These people run for office. Many of them have been around for many years. They are very, very familiar with the areas that they live and run in. They don't necessarily need election data to be uploaded into software to know where certain voters are. I think it's part of their job as candidates, when they are candidates, to know, the different areas that they're running in. And so they don't really need the election data to have some information about that, because they're very well acquainted with these things by virtue of, having been elected. And similarly with racial data, that's another thing that as a candidate, I am sure you're aware of. I'm sure you look at it all the time when you're running for office. And so it not being uploaded into the software doesn't necessarily mean that that's not going to influence how the maps are drawn, because they have that awareness. Okay, Bree, do we have more questions?
No, we're good now. You can keep going. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and Bree, feel free to interrupt me when there are other questions, because while I'm presenting, it's hard to see them. All right, so the next proposed criterion we're going to talk about is compactness. So this is what I was talking about before. Compactness, like the most compact district would be a circle. That District 12 that ran up Highway 85 would be a very non-compact district. And so this is a really long criterion. We had the last one where it was like, well, you can split VTDs if it's necessary. period. This one is quite a bit longer, and basically it says that the committee is going to make reasonable efforts to draw legislative districts and, congressional districts that are compact. I don't know what a reasonable effort is, but I'm sure it's something. And then they can use these certain measures of compactness. They can evaluate their maps with these measures of compactness. One is REOC, one is Polsby-Popper. They both involve comparing either the area or the circumference of the district to a perfect circle of that same area or circumference. And so that's where those scores come from. It's not that important to know. The most important thing is that it says that you can use there are some scores of these two, REOC and Polsby-Popper, that are identified by some of these academics in this paper from 1993 that I looked up because I wanted to know, okay, like what are these minimum measurements? Well, within the 2 hours before this event, I was not able to find that in the paper. I'm sure it's in there somewhere. It's a 106-page paper. I don't know what they have as the minimum measurements. I'm not sure why, if there are minimum measurements specified in that paper, that you could just not put them in the criteria instead of citing the paper. So, that's a huge question. And also, again, while it references these minimum measurements, even if we had them, it just says that they can be used as a guide, that the legislators should make reasonable efforts to make compact. There's no bounds here. There's no concrete bounds to what they can or can't do in terms of compactness.
There's a question about that, Leica.
Yeah.
Couldn't population in an area overrule compactness?
Yeah, so these things are ordered. So equal population is always going to be at the very top. That's the top requirement always. That's always the top priority. So yeah, if you need to get that equal population and that means the district's less compact, then you will make a less compact district. So yes, that's sort of the priority there. However, this doesn't really come up that often just because there are so many ways to draw districts. All right. Let me go to the next slide. All right, municipal boundaries. So municipal boundaries, I think this is pretty obvious. They're the boundaries around a city. They're the city limits. And then this says the committee may consider municipal boundaries when drawing districts. Again, they may consider them. Like, they are allowed to look at the city boundaries if they want to. That's why I interpret they may consider them as. So it's really unclear if not splitting cities has a priority level here when this language is so vague. They may consider them. I mean, I hope they consider them. Most of us, live in some kind of city or town with boundaries. All right, so election data. So this is what we were talking about before when I was answering people's question about this. This says partisan considerations and election results data shall not be used in the drawing of districts in the 2021 Congressional House and Senate plans. Again, what this means is that they will not upload this kind of like election or voter registration, voter party registration. They won't upload that data into the software that's used. I don't think there's anything we can do about the information that's already in legislators' heads. And then also the other thing I want to bring up is that this focuses on the input, right? It focuses on whether or not this data is in the software. It doesn't tell us anything about the outcome of the map. Like, this doesn't tell us anything about like how we figure out if the map is fair, or if somehow we have this process and it turns out that the map isn't fair, and not having election data still, even though we didn't use it, we still ended up with a partisan map. It doesn't have any impact on that outcome, right? This is about what's in the software or not in the software to be used. It's not about the actual outcome having partisan advantage baked into it or not. All right. These are the last two. So member residents. Member residents may be considered in the formation of legislative and congressional districts. So again, like I said, this is incumbent addresses is basically what they're thinking of. And in 2019 and in previous years, one of the criteria was no double bunking incumbents. Basically, don't draw two incumbents into the same district and force them to compete against each other. That was a criteria always in the past. It's not something that I personally think is that great. I think it bakes in a lot of problems. If you have a map that's gerrymandered and you protect incumbents, you know, you may end up recreating some of that gerrymander. But this is really strange because it just says member residents may be considered in the formation of these districts. So I would assume there's some measure of trying to protect incumbents there, but it's not specific. I mean, they could be using it to double bunk anyone they don't like. They could, you know, they could use, it just says you can use the addresses. So again, this is really not specific. We don't really know what they're going to do with this. Historically, it has meant that they protect incumbents, that they don't put them in the same districts as each other. However, this version, I don't know. And then this last one is community consideration. It says, so long as a plan complies with the foregoing criteria, i.e. this is the lowest priority, local knowledge of the character of the communities and connections between communities may be considered in the formation of legislative and congressional districts. So again, this is the last one. This is the lowest priority. Second of all, again, we have this language of may be considered. Like, do they have to consider it? No, they don't have to consider it. It may be considered. They could consider it. They might, you know, decide they want to consider it. But as far as I can tell, this does not say anything about them having to consider this kind of information. And this is the information that they get when they have public hearings. This is the information they get from you all when you go to a public hearing and say, hey, you know, the previous map split my downtown, the downtown of my city down the middle, and that, I don't think that's appropriate. Like, that's what they mean here. That's what a community consideration is. And it's unclear how that's going to be dealt with. All right. So we have the examples of the proposed criteria we saw today. These are the criteria that I assume possibly with some amendments that will be voted on Thursday. What do we have to compare that to? Like, what are some different options about criteria? So I pulled together some examples from some other states of criteria that are considered by, you know, there's a national conference of state legislatures kind of compiles a lot of this data. And these are some criteria that are considered to be either, you know, sort of new and interesting, or are going to be used for the first time this year. But these are other criteria options that exist elsewhere in the country. So there'd be sort of explicit preservation of communities of interest, an explicit prohibition on favoring or disfavoring incumbents, candidates, or parties. Competitiveness as a criteria exists elsewhere. Proportionality also is a new criteria that they are using in Ohio this year. So I'll talk through these a little bit. This is examples of the kind of criteria we could have. And the reason I'm showing you this is because the goal of this training is to get you to the point where you can submit a comment about redistricting criteria. And so I give you I wanted to show you what the proposed criteria were and some possible downfalls of those. And I want to show you what some of the other options are for criteria, what some of the possibilities are for criteria that have been used in other states that you may want to, if you think they're particularly compelling, you may want to advocate for them in your comment. All right, so.
Leica.
Yeah.
Can we pause for a couple questions?
Yes, we can.
Okay. One question is, how do the congressional district decisions impact local districts like city council, for example?
I think that they are not really tied to those districts in any direct way. The only similar example I can think of is that I know that Buncombe County Commissioner districts are the same as the state legislative districts for the House. But the congressional districts don't have a direct impact on city council or other local districts, in my understanding.
Great. And then can you explain a little bit more about what you mean by preservation of communities of interest?
I will talk about that. Do we have more questions though before, because I feel like the next slide is about communities of interest. So
Nope, that's it. Thanks.
okay.
Is there a limit on the number of districts that they make?
Yes, so that is basically the number of districts for congressional. They do apportionment after the census. So that happened earlier this year in April. We gained a congressional seat here in North Carolina because of our population growth and other states' population loss. So we went from having 13 congressional seats to now having 14 congressional seats. So that's what happens at the federal level. They do apportionment. The Census Bureau does that. And then for us here for state legislative districts, we have 120 representatives and senators altogether. 170. We have 120 in the House and 150 in the Senate. And so that's as many as we get. And so basically each time the census comes around, and if population grows, each of them is representing more people, because we just take the total population and divide it by, say, like we divide it by 120, because that's how many House members we have. So if our population was lower, population's higher, it changes the size of those districts. But the number of the districts stay the same for state legislature. Okay. Moving on to communities of interest. So you don't have to read this whole thing, but this is a community of interest definition for California's redistricting. And first of all, the things to take from this is ranked 4th in their priority list. So that's quite high. It's ranked after equal population and contiguity, which are super important. You'll find them probably at the top of everyone's sort of redistricting criteria list because they're so crucial. And then they also have a criteria there about sort of respecting or complying with the Voting Rights Act. And this is right after that. So this is a very high priority right for them because they list criteria in order of priority the same way we are. And this is right near the top. So it's high priority. That's important. It defines communities of interest, which, it says examples are common to, examples of such shared interests are those common to an urban area, rural area, industrial area, or agricultural area, or common to those areas where people share similar living standards, same transportation facilities, have similar work opportunities. So they define what they think of as a community of interest. So they have some kind of definition of community of interest. It's high priority on their list. And at the end, it says communities of interest shall not include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates. So communities of interest are one of those things. Community of interest is just a group of people who share some kind of interest that means that they would be better kept whole in the same district for voting purposes. I think that a lot of states have trouble with communities of interest because it can be hard to define. It can encompass a lot of different things. However, California has at least done a decent job of being somewhat specific, and they value it highly, right? So they are looking, when they go to hear public comment, that tends to be really important and influential for them because it's so high in their priority list. And so we could definitely be doing communities of interest better. Favor or disfavor an incumbent or party. So here's an example from Ohio that's explicitly: the place of residence of any incumbent or political candidate shall not be considered in creation of a map. Districts shall not be drawn for the purpose of favoring or discriminating against an incumbent, political candidate, or political party. So this is from some of the new standards that Ohio, they had a ballot initiative, I believe, and changed their redistricting process. And this is one of the standards that came with it. And so obviously this is the first time they're gonna be using it. However, lots of other states have similar standards to this. I picked this one because it's the shortest, but a lot of other states have criteria that forbid you from considering the addresses of incumbents or candidates for office. So you can't protect incumbents, you can't protect people maybe running for that office and give them a favorable seat. And then, explicitly forbids you from favoring or disfavoring an incumbent or an incumbent political candidate or political party in the criteria. So we don't have anything like that's this explicit. So I think one thing that I would say is that we have this criterion that says we're not going to use election data. So the data is not going to be uploaded into the maps. We don't have anything like this that says that like explicitly you're not supposed to favor incumbents, parties, etc. All right. Competitiveness. So competitiveness is another criterion that is somewhat newer in a lot of places, though I think it's in place in both Colorado and Arizona and a few other states. So I took the Colorado example because my Colorado colleague shared it with me. So they basically what they have is they have a list of criteria and it just says competitiveness. And here's the part of their law where they actually define competitiveness. So it says competitive means having a reasonable potential for a party affiliation of the district's representative to change at least once between decennial censuses. Competitiveness may be measured by factors such as a proposed district's past election results, proposed district's political party registration data, and evidence-based analyses. And so they have competitiveness as one of their priorities, and they define competitiveness as, you know, a reasonable chance that that seat is going to change hands. Using whatever measures. And as I've heard from my colleague, currently they're in the middle of the process of deciding exactly what those measures are. So they are specifying those measures. They're going to specify, you know, what the sort of partisan breakdown of those districts should be in some way. So I mean, again, competitiveness is a criterion that other states use. And this is an example of Colorado and how they do that. Okay, proportionality. Proportionality is another one of these new criterion that are a criteria that are being used by Ohio. We don't know what it's actually going to look like in practice. They haven't used it before, but it's really interesting and it's something that they've put together and that their voters voted for. So this says that the statewide proportion of districts whose voters, based on statewide, state and federal partisan general election results, so looking at election results over the last 10 years, the proportion of sort of those districts that favor each political party shall correspond closely to the statewide preferences of the voters. So basically what that means is that, say this was in North Carolina, if this was in place in North Carolina, it would mean that our state legislature should be divided about 50-50 between Democrats and Republicans, because that's what our statewide elections look like. So if this proportionality criterion was in effect, we'd have sort of a 50-50-ish legislature. It would be very competitive, very close, you know, in terms of who was in control of it. And so that's what proportionality looks like. And so again, this is like a newer criterion. However, it's something that Ohio is going to be using this year. And I think it's super interesting what they're trying to do with this. And so that's another thing that you can think about when you're writing your own comment, if that's a criterion that appeals to you. All right, I'm briefly going to talk about how to make a comment in person and how to make a comment online, just the actual like logistics of it. And we will share out this information in a follow-up email. So this is just the basics of like, if you are coming to Raleigh, these are my tips. So the in-person comment is going to happen on Tuesday, so tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. I would encourage you, if you are coming, to get there a bit early. And then it's going to happen in the Legislative Office Building. So Legislative Office Building is a building that's behind the actual General Assembly building. It's where a lot of legislators have their offices, basically, and their committee meeting rooms there. So that's where it's going to be. It's in room 544. If you are coming, I recommend there is a parking lot on 101 North Wilmington Street. The entrance is actually around the corner on Jones Street. That is where I would recommend parking. It's probably the closest place that's easy to park at. It is pay parking. This is Raleigh, unfortunately. I know I have it to my friends who feel like it's unjust, but it is true. And so that's where I would recommend parking if you were coming. Just my personal advice, that's what I do. And we will share this information with you. I just took some pictures while I was walking in there today. They had a committee meeting today, and just to show you what this actually looks like. So in this picture on the left, you can see like that building that's in the sort of distance, that like sort of squarish building, that is the actual legislative office building. On the right, you'll see there's there's sort of a member and staff door on this side, and there's a visitor's door. So you'll obviously be using the visitor's door. Also, you can see the really weird like sign that says quote unquote slippery when wet. I don't know why there are quotes there. And also it's just a weird thing to say on this random sign. So this is the visitor door that you would be using. There is security there. So like, that's something to be prepared for. Don't have mace on your keyring like I did the other day, which I had to give to them. It's not as intense as airport security, but it is security. You're gonna have to take your laptop out of your bag if you're bringing it. You're gonna have to go through the metal detector. You might have to get wanded down. I think their metal detectors are really sensitive. I get wanded down every single time because of my watch, so just be prepared for that. It's not a pleasant experience, but it's there, and we've definitely had threats of violence at the legislature, to be fair, so it is reasonable. And then this other picture on the right, there's going to be a whole bank of elevators that you're going to take up to the 5th floor, and that is the door to the committee room, 544, and that's what the inside of the committee room looks like. I'm like taking this picture from the little seating area at the back. There are a lot of people there tomorrow. People may be pushed into the hall. That's just sort of in there, and there are some chairs in the hall usually as well. So hopefully there will be places for you all to sit if you are there. All right.
Like how much should people expect to pay for parking?
It's not a lot. I think when I've been there for like the full day, I think it's cost me like, I don't know, $12. So I don't think it's a ton. I'd have to we can try to look it up for you. But I think it's under $20 for sure for the whole day.
Okay, great. And people should wear masks. We will recommend people wear masks. Is there anything you can say about the prevalence of masks, or?
I would recommend that you wear a mask. I will be honest that I'd say it's about 50-50 of people actually wearing masks inside. That is not great. I don't think that that's great, especially considering what's going on right now in our state with the new variant. However, I do know, you maybe all saw the ad, most of the legislators and their staff are vaccinated at this point. So I guess that's a consideration. But yes, if you don't feel safe, please don't come. We don't want you to feel like you're endangering your health or anything like that. Unfortunately, I think the people who are running this process don't have the same cares about your health that we hope that you do. And so that's what I would say is, however, if you feel comfortable, wear a mask, come. I will be there. I'll be wearing a mask. I will bring masks with me in case something happens. Yeah, I think that's all I can say. If you feel comfortable, please come. We would love to have you. I think the turnout is important. However, I do not want anyone to endanger themselves. And so if you don't feel safe, that makes sense. There's going to be an option for online comment that I'll tell you about in just a second. Are there any other questions, Spring? Okay. How to make a comment online. So you can also make a comment online. I think we would ask that if you make a comment online that you submit it by noon on Thursday, I think would be the latest, because they will be voting on the criteria probably Thursday afternoon. And so, obviously we want to give them a chance to read it before they do vote on criteria. And so commenting online is the next best thing. Bree, if you could drop the actual comment link, you just follow the link that Bree is going to put in the chat, and you will see this form. You will, put your name in this form, organization if you have one, redistricting public comments, and then you will just put your comment in that comment box, and then you will submit it. And these comments are going into the public record, as it says. They are supposed to be part of the public record. And that's sort of the point.
So can you reiterate when that you think people should submit by? There's a comment that someone thought that the online comments had to be submitted by tomorrow morning.
My belief is that tomorrow morning is just when the in-person comments are. I think that if you submit a comment online, assuming that the comment space is going to be open, if you submit it by Thursday at noon, I'd say that's just sort of my estimation. If we consider that they're going to vote in the afternoon, that would be my recommendation. I don't recall hearing anything about comments having to be submitted online by tomorrow morning. If someone else did hear that somewhere from one of the legislators during session today, during the committee meeting today, please let me know, because that's important information. But as far as I know, that's not the case. All right. So next, we're going to talk about making your comment effective. So now, hopefully you have some idea of how to make a comment in the first place. We're going to talk about what actually makes an effective comment, right? Because if you're going to go out there, or if you're going to submit a comment online, we don't want you to waste your time. We want it to be something that is going to be meaningful, that's going to be impactful, that's going to make a difference. All right, so here are our tips. First of all, write your comment out ahead of time if you are coming in person. Having it written and with you is it's so helpful. It's very hard to do this kind of stuff off the cuff because it is complicated. If you're like a memory genius and you can do that, then like good on you. But we would recommend writing your comment out ahead of time. And if you're coming in person, bringing it with you. Keep it short. So comments will be in-person comments will be limited to 2 minutes. For me, that is about 300 words. That's like about the rate at which I speak. If you're, nervous or wondering, record yourself and just see how long it takes you to make your statement. It may be worth it so that you don't get cut off at the end. But yeah, try to stay within that limit if you're coming to in person. The online comment, as far as I can tell, it doesn't have an explicit word count. As far as I can tell, it's actually quite long. It's about 1,200 words, just from my random testing. And so obviously you don't have to be as brief there. However, I'd say it's still in your interest to be somewhat brief and direct in general. That is the way you can be most influential. Be specific about what criteria you'd like to see. You should actually be specifically saying, this is a criteria, for example, this is a criteria that has been proposed. I think it is wrong. I think it is inadequate for X, Y, and Z reasons. This is a criteria that other states have used that I think we should be using. This is what it is. This is how it works. So you need to be specific about the criteria you would like to see. Give a personal explanation. I mean, one thing that is valuable is just having you say why you picked those criteria, why they are important to you. I'm hoping that we hear from a wide range of people, that a wide range of people submit comments and that they have a wide range of ideas about the criteria that they think are important or that would be ideal. And so, we want to hear why these are important to you. Again, check for proper grammar and spelling. It always makes you more effective. It doesn't take long to do. Just a basic tip. All right, what not to do if you want to be effective. Obviously I'm not your boss or your mom. You can write whatever you want. But these are sort of tips for, in this particular instance, what is not as effective. Right now, talking about other aspects of the redistricting process, so talking about the public comment schedule, or talking about county clusters, or talking about talking about some other aspect of the process is not as helpful in this moment. In this moment, we want you to focus on criteria because that is the vote that is coming up. Don't come in and don't come in and advocate for a form of redistricting that we do not have this year. I would love it if we had an independent commission. I think that would be, for me, the gold standard. However, talking about that in this forum is not helpful. I think that if I were a legislator who wanted to gerrymander, what I would love the most is to have a bunch of people show up and talk about how much they hate the process, how they wish the process was different in very general terms, and not tell me specifically what I should be doing, because then they're not telling me specifically what I should be doing. And so I don't have to pay attention to them. And so advocating for a form of redistricting that we don't have this year, it's just not going to do a lot of work in this process. We are really hoping to have a concrete influence on this process, and that means addressing the situation that we are living in, the situation we actually have, is as unfortunate as that is. So that is another thing. Don't go over the time or word limit. Again, I said about 300 words is what it would be for me to speak for 2 minutes. But they will cut you off, and if you are in person, and so try to keep to that, because we want to hear everything you have to say. All right. So for keep it short, and Bree, do you want to share the template that we put together? So we did put together a really quick template to help you write your comment. We encourage everyone to write their comment out ahead of time. And so we did put together a template that you can make a copy of, that you can use to help you write your own comment. So you can follow this basic format. Introduce yourself, give your name, give where you live, maybe just a brief, like half a sentence about why this is important to you. Share the specific criteria you want to see add, taken out, changed. And then clearly state what you want the committee to do. So, at the end, give them a concrete call for action. If you feel like you're repeating yourself, that's fine. If you're saying, say again, you should be, for instance, putting in proportionality as a criteria. I think that's important. Again, be specific about criteria. So within those sort of 300 words, especially, but even if it's longer, specify a max of 1 to 3 criteria. More than that is going to be too much for people to understand or handle. In fact, I would say 1 to 2 is ideal. And so, here are some examples that we wrote of like possible ways that this could work. Different communities have different needs, and respecting communities of interest is important to get maps that represent our state. Community considerations should be high priority in this process rather than last. Or example, I believe our districts should represent the people in our state and what they want fairly. To do this, General Assembly should use a proportionality criteria like that used in Ohio. So giving a specific example, stating specifically what you want to see what you want to see as far as criteria, that's super, super important. Make it personal. If you have the space, I think do say that, I'm sure that all of you who are here are upset about the situation, our situation, upset about the maps that we have in North Carolina, and want to do this because you care about maps being fair, because you've lived with unfair maps and you know what the effects of unfair maps are. If you do have room to add a personal sentence, maybe 1 sentence or 2, I think that's also can be really compelling and helpful. For instance, I know a lot of people who live in rural areas, they are in danger of having local hospitals closed because we haven't expanded Medicaid. That's something that is a natural result of the maps that we have. And so, that's the kind of thing that I would mention if I wanted to make it personal. All right, Bree, do we have any other questions, or should we just give people a minute to write?
I think maybe if there is anything that hasn't been answered, and if folks want to just unmute and ask a question, that would be great. I may have missed, I tried to stay on top of it, but I might have missed something. And otherwise, I think letting people write would be great.
Hi, I'm Helen Wood in Charlotte.
Hi.
Hey, so just by general education I'm wondering if, I think I heard you say that the redistricting will also impact, these criteria would be used also for the North Carolina House and Senate, is that right?
Yes, so these criteria will apply to all of the maps they're redrawing. They're redrawing the North Carolina House, the North Carolina Senate, and our state congressional maps. And so these criteria would be used for all of those.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
We are getting several questions about whether the slides will be shared out. We can't share the slides out, but the template doc that we shared, and I'll drop the link again, has a lot of this information word for word in it that you can reference.
All right, I will just go to the next slide, which just has sort of a process for, you know, how to draft your comment. And I'd say we're getting close to 8 p.m., which I know is our cutoff time, and I want to respect that for people. But let's just take the next few minutes, maybe the next 5 minutes or so, 5-7 minutes, to why don't you all go ahead and try to start drafting. You can look at the template that Bree shared, and go ahead, and as you're writing, please ask questions. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask questions if you have any. Marilyn Hartman is asking if the For the People Act passes, will this have any impact on redistricting this year? Theoretically, it does have some criteria requirements, actually. It does some of the things that it does for around redistricting are redistricting criteria requirements. It would also require a commission to be set up, but that wouldn't take effect until 2030. In my recollection, and so it would theoretically impact the process, because those redistricting criteria would be required, the ones that are contained there. So the comments, Kitty is asking, are you saying comments presented online should be under 300 words too? No, they don't need to. If you're online, the limit is quite high. It's more like 1,200 words or something like that. So you have a lot more space. I would still say it's sort of in your interest to be more brief and concise, just because it tends to be more effective, but you have a lot more space if you're just writing an online comment.
Reka.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. A question: if we give our names and where we live, and there is a record of who we are, and we're writing that, for instance, we don't think incumbents should, that it shouldn't, a criteria shouldn't be used to protect incumbents, and they can look and see who is commenting, and if it's if the legislators are against that thought, can't they just discount it and say, well, you know, there's none of those crazies from, you know, we don't have to listen to her, she's just not one of us, or what?
I mean, so I would say that's always a danger, you know. I mean, we all live in North Carolina, we all know what our legislature is like. I don't think our legislature acts in a way that meets what people actually want. So that's always a danger. However, I would say that we do, you know, there's a guy at the Brennan Center who did a study about redistricting comments, and specificity is really important. And he's measured actual impacts in places like Utah, where they have a similar system to ours, where legislators draw maps. So I think it is possible to influence the process that way. I think the other consideration is that this is going into the public record, right? And so, you know, one of the important things about the public record is that North Carolina, there's always litigation on redistricting maps. It happens constantly. It's been happening since, I don't know, the 60s. So, you know, if there is some kind of litigation on the maps in the future, they go to those public records to look for evidence often. And it's really helpful for them to see what people were actually wanting, what people were actually asking for. And so I would say, even if we don't get the criteria changes that we want to see this time, it does have an impact. Right, it does go into that record. It is important. It is important in sort of a longer term sense.
Okay, thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Leica,
It's
Harry Taylor in Charlotte. I signed up on the site, yes, on your site yesterday to speak tomorrow. Did you, if I signed up, did you transfer those names that signed up to the sign up sheet
Oh, no, I'm sorry. We were doing that so that we could keep track of the people that our volunteers we knew were coming. We set that up when there was no official online sign-in. Today, sometime after 4 p.m., they actually officially put a sign-up link on the legislative website. You should have gotten or should be getting an email from us with that link in it. I'm sorry that we didn't transfer those over when we were collecting those names at first. There was no way to let the committee know about them.
Okay, I did. I signed up on the link too.
Oh, okay, great.
But there was a note in here in the chat that they're limiting it to 30 people. Is that correct?
So what we heard at the committee meeting today is that it is a 2-hour-long meeting. People are getting 2 minutes apiece, so it is limited to 60 people at the most. That's what they're saying.
60?
Yes,
60?
yes, 60
Okay.
people. That's what they said today. You know, I will again say that we really don't know what it's going to look like tomorrow. It's North Carolina, things can change really quickly. And also, I would remind everyone again, like I said at the top, I will be there, and Ted Corcoran, who works with us, will be there, and we really want to, anyone who is not able to make a public statement to the committee in person, we want to see you. We want to film you giving your comment. And we want to, with your permission, share that on our networks to show how many people were excluded from this process, if they are excluded, because that's a real problem. So I'd say, even if you think you're a little bit late and you're probably not going to get to talk to the committee, please come, please kind of do this show of solidarity, talk to us. We want to connect with you, and we would also love to kind of draw attention to your testimony by making a video.
If you can't come in person, would it help to video our comments and send you the video?
Yes, we would love that. If you feel confident to take a video of yourself, please do. Please do. That we would love that so much, and we will use it in whatever kind of public series that we try to put together with these videos.
But then I would also write it out and submit it in writing.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, if you are writing and submitting online, you know, if you are able, please take a short video of you reading your comment. That would be great, and share it with us. We will use it. And you know, we would be super, super grateful. Also, in general, keep a written copy of your comment so that you always have it just for yourself. I mean, and if you have one, send it to us. We'll keep it as well. But yeah, take a video of yourself. That would be great. We would love that. We would love that.
There's a question in the chat, like that if you were able to sign up online, does that guarantee that does that mean you have a spot to speak tomorrow?
I don't actually think so. I think that they are just I don't think that they're cutting anyone off. I think they're just letting people sign up. And so I don't think it necessarily guarantees you a spot tomorrow. I don't know for a fact, but that would be my guess.
Leica,
Mm-hmm.
It's Rob Cushman from Durham.
Hi.
I'm curious whether you have a sense of which, whether competitiveness or proportionality is likely to ring better in their ears. And proportionality is the one that was used in Ohio, I believe, and
yeah, I mean, I think all I would say is you know, I think they're both really interesting criteria, and the only thing that I would say is that, like, competitiveness has been around, I think, at least in Arizona for a while as a criterion. So it has a little bit more history than proportionality does. But I would say I'm hoping that there are enough people that we hear a variety of criteria that people want anyway. And so I would write about the one that you feel like you can write about the most passionately or with the most conviction. I think that's really the important thing.
do you think a personal note that I'm so tired of the divisiveness, and I feel like if people had a more proportional district, they'd have to speak to more than just one side of the aisle in getting elected, and that there'd be an easier way to compromise. Could that be my personal
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
better.
it's really whatever is compelling to you. As long as you're being specific about the criteria you'd like to see, that's the main thing. And I think you can kind of advocate for it in whatever way makes sense to you.
Okay, thank you.
Bree, there's someone asking where we would email the video if someone made a video. Do you want to give your email address? I think that probably is the best.
Yeah, that's great. And I was also thinking I might try to set up like a Dropbox or something and include it in the follow-up email that people could just put it in, but I would be happy to take them in my email as well if folks do that. And let's just say if you do a video, if you make a video of yourself giving your public comment, I think that would be awesome. And you know, post it and tag your reps and use the hashtag NCPaul and hashtag fair maps. And let's get it out too. You could post it, but I'll make a Dropbox for it and include it in the email that goes out after.
All right, we are just about at time, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Thank you so much to everyone who came out. This is an amazing turnout for something that's so last minute. I have a feeling there are going to be a lot of last minute things with the legislature we have running this process, but I am so encouraged by seeing all these people here tonight. I hope you all got a chance to at least work on your comment. I hope you will all get a chance to submit it before Thursday and try to have an impact on the redistricting criteria, even though, you know, they're really rushing the situation and trying to shut us out. We will overcome, let's say that. So yeah, thank you all so much. We will send a follow-up email with any of the links that we shared here. If Bree makes a Dropbox for videos, we will put it in there. We will share the template with you again there. And if you want to rewatch this video, we will probably put a copy on YouTube, but you can also right away, it might take us a minute to get it onto YouTube, but we will also have it on Facebook. If you go to our Facebook page, the All Online North Carolina Facebook page, and you go to the videos tab, you should be able to find it there. All right, well, thank you so much for being here. I'm so encouraged by everyone. It was definitely a tough day, so this is making me feel a lot better. All right, well, everyone have a good evening. And again, feel free to reach out. I think actually I'll put my email in the chat. And Bree already put her email in the chat. If there's something specific that comes up for you, please feel free to contact us. All right, well, hopefully we'll see some of you tomorrow morning, and we'll see the rest of you sometime soon. All right, good night.
Thank you. Good night.